Welcome everyone to the Preschool Neuroscience Summit. Today we're really excited to have Ruth Whiteside with us. She is from the Children's Emotional Language and Thinking company, and she has been on our summits before to share about adverse childhood experiences. She's given a free resource for you of free training to learn about the impact of ACE, and but she's, I've got to know her through a common training company that we both have done work for with 6 Seconds. She has a passion and a practice in emotional intelligence. She coaches groups and individual educators to unlock their own EQ. She was a former primary school teacher in the UK. And then a senior leader, and she's very experienced in trauma, resilience, and all these things that we need, particularly now, I think, in this time of COVID. So welcome, Ruth, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Okay, well, thank you for having me, Helen. It's great to be here again, and just have the opportunity to talk about things I'm passionate about is lovely. It's just a real such a bonus to what I do.
Thank you. Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. Can you tell us a little bit from a neuroscience perspective or an EQ perspective, what we know about how and why we behave in certain ways as a human species?
Okay. Yes, I think this is something that really has I've only really understood in recent years. I kind of had some sense of that when I was certainly in my early years as a teacher, which is what drew me to emotional intelligence in the first place. But it's been, as much as anything, me getting older and perhaps a little bit wiser that's led me to a position where I kind of can see that our patterns of behavior are so often entrenched, and we have no idea that is the case. And it's taken me until the ripe old age of 52 to get to a point where I can sit there and think, oh yeah, I do that all the time, don't I? And understand that that's my go-to reaction. And for me, it's about, when you recognize that that's your go-to reaction, when you realize that that's because, your brain lays down these neural pathways, and, you don't deviate from those neural pathways, you just carry on doing as you always do. And it's when you realize that and you recognize that actually you don't have to keep reacting in those certain ways, that you can actually learn to respond in different ways. And that really, for me, is huge. In terms of, how the brain works and neuroscience, we know from endless amounts of research, we know from functional MRI scan pictures that the brain, the neural pathways kind of allow the brain to work in a very efficient way, that we can we can react to certain situations because that's how we've always done it. That's the pathway that we've established over time. And that pathway might have been established because of who we've observed, who we've been part, the family that we've been part of, the experiences that we've had, the people that we meet along the way, the expectations that we have when we watch our favorite soap operas and things. We pick up all these messages all of the time and use them to kind of lay down our own specific neural pathways. And it does mean that if you are not aware of that, then it means that you can, I think, be quite limited in how you respond to things, to life. And I think, COVID-19 is one of the things that has affected every single person on this planet to one degree or another. And it's been really interesting watching how people have responded, how they've changed, how they've understood their own reactions, and understood that actually it's all going on up here. The brain is a remarkable thing, but sometimes we need to teach it to do differently, to think differently, to respond in a different way, so that we can lay down new neural pathways. So this for me is I think, the pinnacle of my 52 years of learning about myself. Is like, oh yes, I have the power, the capacity to respond differently to any given situation. And I think that's true of all of us.
Yeah, it is a journey, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh,
For
yes.
us all, I think. And every time you look back, you think, wow, like why didn't I know that back then?
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Mm.
Ruth, can you tell us a little bit more about how we can move from kind of those reactions we're faced with difficult situations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's got to have you need to start with that level of self-awareness, I think, and like I say, that's really hard, and not all of us get the opportunity to kind of develop that self-awareness. It's that understanding, I think, that when we recognize our triggers, when we recognize our patterns of behavior, it's thinking, okay, well, if this is how I would normally react, are there any other options open to me? And it might just be, a moment of epiphany for you on a personal level, that you think, oh, why do I always do that? Why always? Why have I always followed that pattern for the last 30 years? It might just be that, or it might be somebody telling you might be having a stand-up blazing row with your partner, and they point out something that you think, oh, yes, that is me, isn't it? I'm so sorry. Oh my goodness, I've been doing that forever. Or it might be something that comes from, a CPD opportunity at, the place that you work. It might come from, getting therapy because something you're dealing with something big. But the path to self-awareness, I think, it isn't something that we kind of that many of us pick up on and work with from a suitably early enough age. I think it comes to us later, but with that self-awareness comes the capacity, I think, to recognize there are other things that one can do, there are other options, there are other choices. So it's moving then into that idea of self-management. So I think we can't be very effective at self-managing if we haven't got that self-awareness, and it's with the self-management that you can start to apply some, so the pros and cons of a situation, and recognize, actually, I could do this, I could do that, perhaps I could do the other, and rather than automatically doing that, which is what we do so much of the time. So it's that recognition. But I think in order to be able to make that move from reaction to responsiveness, we have to be kind of self-aware in the first place, and which for me is why we need to be doing this from day one with our kids, as babies, toddlers, preschool, when they go to school, when they're going to university. We should be really working on this level of self-awareness, I believe.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think it's, I'm always like, why didn't I learn this when I was a kid?
Yeah, absolutely.
As you say, those neural pathways can be quite deep and more
Yes.
difficult, I guess, they can change. But wouldn't it be better to just learn it when you're young?
Yeah.
So Ruth, tell us a little bit about maybe some strategies we could use with young children to help them learn how to move from reaction to responsiveness.
Okay, well, a resource that I've used before, and I've used it with my own grandchildren, but also in schools and with older kids as well as younger kids, is this. I don't know if you've come across them before, but this fabulous little box of cards, emotion cards. And I love these because they're so simple. So much of what we do in schools is so prescriptive, particularly in the UK. I don't know what it's like elsewhere, but particularly in the UK. And it's about finding a resource that is accessible for all, including the teacher who's kind of got to deliver a curriculum. What is beautiful about these cards is that they have a whole selection, range of faces. So we've kind of got, this is a kind of a mad face, and then it develops an intensity so that we've got the slightly bit more face, and then we've got the one where really mad, and then we've got the one that's a full-on angry, mad, why would you do that kind of face? And I think what I love about this whole sort of what layers of intensity of emotions is that when we work with kids of various ages, and this is in my experience, children have got quite a limited vocabulary when it comes to describing their feelings. So it might be that they are angry, but it's really hard to determine where their anger is on a scale. And we would quite often, you know, in schools I've been, you know, and I've done it myself in my early years of teaching, where there might be a continuum, and you might have a happy face on one side and a sad face on the other. Okay, children, where are you today? Are you feeling happy or are you feeling sad? And by accident, we're perpetuating this idea that there was, you know, you're either happy or you're sad. And we're not really exploring all of the in-between bits. And I think that is incredibly limiting, but it is something that we do in school from a very early age, because we kind of think we need to keep it easy for the kids, and we need to keep it easy for us as the teachers, because we've got the maths to do, or the English to do, or the whatever else to do. And I think for me, the important thing is not just to talk about being sad, but to talk about degrees or intensity of sadness. Because until children can start to articulate how sad they're feeling, or describe it within the context of the sadness, then we really are sort of, you know, working towards not very much at all, I would argue. Something that I've used a lot, and I've also used this in training with adults, is an emotometer. I'm sure you've come across it before. So it's kind of like the temperature, the thermometer. It's not measuring temperature. It's actually got a high intensity at the top, low intensity in the bottom. And this is to encourage adults as well as kids to say, yeah, okay, you're feeling happy, brilliant, but where are you on the intensity of that level of happiness? So, you know, me coming in to work on a Monday morning, having booked my once in a lifetime holiday, I'm going to be high intensity happy, because, you know, just the nature of being able to do this amazing thing. If I'm happy because it's a Monday morning and the sun actually is shining after a week of rain, and the car started first time, and here I am at work, brilliant, you know, so I'm not ecstatically happy. That's low intensity, and I think that's so valuable to do with kids. So using the cards, I've used the cards in a number of ways, and you know, one of the ways is we've just spread them out, maybe reduce the number of them depending on the age of the child, but just spread a completely random selection out, and just ask them to choose which one of those faces represents how you're feeling today. And they choose that face, and then they talk about why they might be feeling that. And you know, that's a great assessment tool for teachers, in terms of just figuring out, you know, how articulate is the child, what's their emotional language like, are they able to apply that question to themselves, you know, choose the face that most represents how you're feeling. Can they do that? You know, can they recognize their own feelings in the faces of the different cards? So it's really about starting to develop their vocabulary. And it's about doing that on a regular basis, repeating that exercise. Because I think, again, we're too quick to move on in education, particularly in UK education. We don't spend time revisiting stuff, and we need to be revisiting this emotional language all the time, because we need to develop it. And we also need to look for patterns. So, because I think it's important that we recognize patterns. So, you know, a child maybe chooses the same card over a period of 4 or 5 or 6 weeks, same card. And it's kind of working out, okay, is that the card that they just recognize and that's the one they go to? Is it a pattern of emotional, you know, is that emotional state, is that a regular emotional state? For the child who maybe picks a huge range of them, it's understanding, well, you know, is that reflected in the behavior that we see, in the learning disposition, in the way that child is responding to you, the adult in the classroom? Can you see patterns emerging? And the idea for me there is that it's about saying to the children as well, oh, there's a pattern here, isn't there? And as an adult, you know, how perfectly we are positioned to model this process. Right. So we choose a card, and we can choose a card that might, over the next 3 or 4 days, be the same card. So again, you could say to kids, what's my pattern? What's my pattern here? I've been feeling like this for the last few days. I wonder what's going on. And you can have that really lovely conversation where you are actually sharing with the child your emotions, and thereby modeling both explicitly and implicitly how to use that language of emotions, and how to recognize and understand that it's okay if you do feel differently today than you did yesterday. It's also okay if you pick the same card. So it's about the explanation, the articulation of those feelings, which I think is so important, because this is the foundation for self-awareness.
Yeah, so many important points there. I love that, the going deeper, and I think I see as well lots of very surface level, happy, sad, angry, and then that's it.
Absolutely.
Move on. I love what you talked about with the intensity and spending the time, right? And
absolutely.
So go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the emotometer, I think, is one of the most powerful things I've used. But using it in conjunction with the cards is great, because a concrete example of when this has worked, using the emotometer and it wasn't this set of cards, but it was a similar set of a similar product. But the idea was that we were trying to investigate why it was that our older children were coming in from lunchtime across the school, across the 3 different classes, why they were coming in at such a pitch of intensity of emotion. They were coming in and really kind of just bundles of emotions, and it's really hard to kind of get them to kind of calm down, get them ready to do their learning for the afternoon. So we started to use the emotometer and these cards and lots of other kind of strategies around emotional intelligence and learning, developing wider vocabulary. And it emerged that because we did the emotometer over, I think it was 3 weeks, we could see that the pattern was that they because we asked them to put themselves on the emotometer first thing in the morning when they came in, at the beginning of lunchtime before they'd left the classroom, then coming back from lunchtime, and then at the end of the day. So it's because, and we said to the kids, we would like to see what patterns emerge, and we need your help to do that, because we know you're all having problems coming back in at 1 o'clock after lunch. So we kind of want to look at what does that look like if we to sort of capture a picture of it. And we could see that, generally speaking, apart from the odd exception, because there's always an exception, but they'd come to school, most of them at a low intensity of mood, whatever that might be, and thankfully usually pretty happy. And it would get to about lunchtime, and you'd ask them to repeat the exercise, and some of them were kind of still at low intensity, but that's because they'd had enough for school that day, because they were tired, they were worn out, because we'd done nothing but English and maths. Some of them were getting really antsy, they had ants in their pants, they wanted to move, so they were putting themselves up at high intensity because they just wanted to get out there, And of course, then having had that hour of kind of unstructured time where the real structure was in just sitting down and having lunch, when they came back in, they were just all over the place. And of course, and I don't know if this is if this is true of any other country in the world, but if it's windy and if it's a full moon over here in the UK, it affects their behaviour. Absolutely, it's like, wow. So we were, it's crazy, isn't it? So we've got kids coming in who are all at this high intensity of emotion, whatever that emotion might be, and so straight away that you've got to do some calming activities, some activities like looking at the emotions that they're feeling, in order to get them to a point where they're feeling calm, safe, ready to learn, feeling psychologically buffered, if you like, knowing as well that they've been heard, that they've been listened to, they've had an opportunity to say how they're feeling and where they're going to put themselves. And then at the end of the day, again, we're right back down to low intensity, because most of them by now are really tired and just want to go home and, and crash out in front of the TV. So we saw this incredibly clear picture. And of course, the kids were able to see it for themselves, and we changed the structure of the lunchtime, and it really made a huge difference in terms of the intensity of emotion that they were feeling, and the fact that they were able to settle much more readily when they came in from lunchtime, because it was more structured, but also because we put in place a series of tasks which allowed them to explore those emotions, to articulate their emotions. So it kind of had a really positive impact on what we were seeing in the school. And I think this is the value, and particularly with these cards, the fact that you could almost just randomly present a card to a group of kids and just say, I wonder what this person's feeling. Talk to me about what you see on that person's face, and some children might come up with some completely different answers to the other kids. That's okay, because then we start to explore, well, why do you think that? What is it about the face that makes you think that he must be feeling this? And so you're really getting children to focus quite precisely. And as you're doing it as a teacher, you're giving them words that may help them. You might have a word bank on the wall. You may have a list of words, such as the words that we have here, which are all to do with MAD, all the words relating to MAD. And this goes up in intensity from mild to moderate to strong. So, it might be the child says, oh, well, he's feeling crabby. And another child might say, I think he's enraged. And then you start to have the conversation. What's the difference between being a bit crabby and being enraged? What might that feel like on an emotional level? What might that feel like on a physical level? Has anybody here ever been crabby or cranky or and just a bit grumpy? Who here has been enraged? What does enraged mean? What does it look like? Come on, kids, let's get up. Show me what enraged looks like. And so you can have a lot of fun with it. But in kind of doing this kind of developmental work, you're giving kids the capacity, the ability to recognize that there are intensities of feelings, but that you can kind of start to recognize intensities of feelings, whether that's in yourself or in others, and then you can respond accordingly. So it really helps with that sense, but it kind of really links into that idea of those neural pathways. If we can sort of give children the flexibility, the freedom, the opportunity to explore, the feelings, emotions, and all their wondrousness, then maybe we're getting them to be perhaps more flexible with their kind of laying down of those neural pathways, perhaps more open, perhaps more self-aware, more empathic, looking at others and thinking, oh, how do I help my best friend? Miss Whiteside, how do I help my best friend? Look, he's got a sad face on, what can I do? Go and ask your friend. Let's go and ask your friend together. And just being able to generate those conversations, which I think are incredibly important. I didn't think they were as important back when I was a young teacher. But I think now, as a wise old bird, I think I'm much more aware of the importance of giving children, that opportunity to explore the language of emotions.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that. And I think it's true. We need to find the time, because this is important. For kids to get these skills. So Ruth, can you talk a little bit about? You talked a little bit about how we model as teachers, and students pick up on that. But how can these kind of emotion cards help teachers themselves in the classroom? Because we have a lot of teachers who are feeling overwhelmed and stressed.
Absolutely.
And a lot on their plates. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think the beauty for me about understanding ourselves, being in touch with our emotions, which sounds like such a cliche, but never more necessary than now. I think the beauty for me is that it allows any one of us to start to just be more attuned to ourselves. And teachers, and I was one for a very long time, so I know what it's like, where you've got an endless amount of marking to do, endless amount of planning. You're on duty at playtime, so you haven't got time to even go to the loo or have a cup of tea. You know, it's a full-on, constant barrage of a job, really, and I'm sure it's true, it's, you know, worldwide. And I think as teachers, you know, our survival mechanism very often is just to kind of switch off how we're feeling and get on with the job at hand. And getting on with the job at hand is fine up to a point, because it needs to be done, and, you know, this is what we're paid for, it's our responsibility. But there also has to be a point at which you recognise that I need to be feeling, you know, allowing myself to feel these emotions, because I can feel it all getting caught up inside me. And, you know, we've all witnessed, and I have been, you know, the teacher who just one day the child does something and you just think, but why did you do that? And you end up just losing your temper, you know, going mad, raising your voice, sit down, taking yourself off out of the classroom and breathing, you know, just having a deep breath. And, you know, we've all done it at various points. And I think that is, you know, and it's a great learning opportunity if you can come back into the classroom with that child or that class and have the conversation about what's just happened to Miss Whiteside. But it's you know, it's a sign that you've kind of gone too far in the getting on with jobs, and rather than exploring what's going on inside you. Using these cards has been really useful for the teachers that I've worked with who've used them, because they have started to understand for themselves their patterns of behaviour. So when we might have done a bit of training around this, or when I've been working with them in the classroom, you know, they're looking at these cards and I'm talking to the children about patterns of behaviour and you know, wondering why it is that, you know, why do you think you always go for that face in particular? What does that say, do you think, to you? Why does that face resonate with you so much? You know, and I can just, out of the corner of my eye, I can see a teacher just thinking, yes. yeah, I'm beginning to see some correlation here between, you know, my lack of opportunity or ability to do this work on myself. And so whenever I've done any kind of training with any teachers around anything at all to do with emotional intelligence and working with strategies and tools like the emotometer, these cards, there's always been that process of discovery for the teachers too. And I think it's so important, because as teachers, yes, we have to get through the curriculum. Yes, we have to mark and assess their work. Yes, we have to do those informal observations, all of that stuff. But we also have to be able to guide these children that we're teaching from, you know, from those moments of sort of inarticulacy about how they're feeling to moments where they can actually say what it is they need to say, and so that we can hear it. And as teachers, if we are able to model that both explicitly by talking aloud our thinking process, but also implicitly by simply doing it, then actually you're in a much better position for the kids in your class to be able to articulate how they're feeling, why they're feeling it, the patterns of behaviour they can see emerging. And I think for teachers, that's an incredibly empowering moment for them to recognise that if they're going to teach kids this stuff, then they kind of need to do it themselves. They need to believe it. They need to apply it to themselves. And I think that for me is absolutely the nuts and bolts of it. I'm a big proponent of saying it to teachers in whatever subject they teach. Talk aloud your thought process. You know, when you've got a tricky question, whether that's in science or maths or whatever, talk aloud the process of your thinking, because that explicitly models to the kids one way of tackling it. And you can do this with emotions. You can do this with this kind of work. You can go into school having had a really bad night's sleep because you were looking after your cat while she gave birth to 6 kittens. And you can have that conversation with the kids. You know, I don't feel great today, kids. There's a little bit of me that's feeling so happy and accomplished because I've got 6 baby kittens. Look at my photos on my phone. Aren't they beautiful? But I'm feeling exhausted. And I just, you know, because I didn't get any sleep last night. So you know, I just need you to know how I feel, because it's important that you know how I feel. And so it's that kind of level of sharing, of connection, of building on relationships that I think is key to making kids and adults, you know, the teachers, feeling psychologically safe in the classroom. And again, it goes back to this whole neuroscience bit. It goes back to the idea of neural pathways and patterns of behaviour. It's about exploring what we see going on around us all the time and working out, you know, where does that come from? Why do we behave in that way? Why is Miss Whiteside coming into school with big bags under her eyes and saying to us that she feels a bit grumpy? And just sharing. And I know that quite often when I do this kind of training, I have teachers say, oh, but Ruth, you've forgotten what it's like in the classroom. We've got to do all of this other stuff. Yes, we do. But let's do the emotional intelligence stuff first. Let's recognize the huge amount of research that's gone into this that tells us about how we learn to respond or react in the first case, and look at how we encourage children to think critically, to explore different options, to play around with, you know, different words like being impatient or being enraged or explosive. What's the difference between those emotions? You know, what might they look like? What's happening in your brain when you're feeling that level of anger? You know, what's actually physically happening in your brain? And again, relating it all down to kind of the emotional, the emotional data, but also the physical feelings. So it's a much more, so it just relates life to the classroom, to the child, to the teacher, to the family, you know, so that you can see that emotional data affects everybody all of the time. And it's what we do with it that counts. I kind of think I've gone off point there, but
No, it's really great. I think, yeah, I mean, I'm in totally agreement. It's like the most important kind of thing that we can bring into to schools, because it kind of affects everything else, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, how children learn, if they're able to kind of get into a better place. And I love what you said about teachers kind of normalizing that this happens to all of us.
Yeah,
We have good
absolutely.
days and bad days, and it's not you know, just a learning thing, but this is real life and what happens, and showing them how we're managing
absolutely.
what's happening, right? So,
Yeah.
well, thank you so much, Ruth, for
That's
coming
great.
on and sharing all those great examples. First of all, like real examples from the classroom, and those great practical things that we can do as teachers to help ourselves and help the children that we work with. Just want to remind everyone, we'll have all the links to Ruth's website and her social media, and do check out the free learning resource that's there as well. But thank you, Ruth, so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's been great. Thank you.